He had failed in an attempt to escape from prison. As a result, he was thrown into a solitary confinement cell for an entire year. Every day, he was given only half a bowl of thin soup as food. But despite such a meager diet, he never stopped exercising and keeping his body strong. He had only one goal: to prepare for his next escape attempt. One of his friends secretly slipped half a coconut into his food. With the help of that little extra energy, his condition gradually began to improve, but the prison guards soon became suspicious. How could a prisoner remain so strong and active on such a tiny ration? After investigating, they discovered the truth. Furious, the guards killed the man who had been delivering the food. Sometime later, the prison warden personally came to his cell and questioned him about who had been bringing him the coconut. But he flatly refused to reveal his friend's name. As punishment for his stubbornness, the warden reduced his food ration even further. He also had the small window near the ceiling sealed, leaving him in complete darkness where he could no longer tell day from night. He had to spend the rest of the year in that pitch-black, solitary cell. An ordinary person would lose their sanity within days in such a place, but his determination was extraordinary. He endured every hardship and eventually succeeded in escaping from prison. This film, Papillon, is based on a true story. Many people consider it so remarkable that it is compared with famous prison films like The Shawshank Redemption. At the beginning of the story, Papillon is stripped of his clothes and sent to prison along with other inmates. A prisoner standing behind him tells him that the man ahead is a millionaire and must have a lot of money hidden inside his stomach. From the very day Papillon was sentenced, he had only one obsession: escaping from prison. And to escape, money was the most important thing. When the prisoners boarded the ship, Papillon began watching the wealthy prisoner, Dega. He deliberately left an empty space near where he slept, and then approached Dega, who was forced to crouch on the floor. Papillon told him he could protect him and keep him alive among these dangerous prisoners. In return, Dega would have to pay him. But Dega didn't trust him. He believed bribing the guards was safer than trusting another prisoner. That very night, however, his opinion changed. In the middle of the night, a horrifying scream echoed through the ship. Dega woke up and saw that the prisoner sleeping beside him had been brutally murdered by another giant inmate. The attacker had ripped open his stomach, and blood was everywhere. What happened next was even more terrifying. The murderer reached into the blood and flesh and pulled out the money hidden inside the dead prisoner's intestines. He kept some of it for himself and handed the rest to the guards. Only after receiving their share did the guards blow the whistle to report the incident. The other guards casually removed the body as though nothing had happened. Seeing this, Dega realized there was no point expecting protection from the guards. He himself could be the next victim. Terrified, he went to Papillon that very night, and the two reached an agreement. Papillon would protect him, and in return, Dega would pay him. As Papillon had predicted, greed had not ended. That night, while everyone slept, a dangerous prisoner quietly approached Dega's bed. But Papillon was already prepared. He attacked from behind with lightning speed, and using his exceptional fighting skills, killed the attacker. After this incident, the partnership between the two grew even stronger. A few days later, the ship crossed the sea and arrived at the infamous prison colony in French Guiana, considered one of the most terrifying penal colonies in the world. As the prisoners were being unloaded, one of Papillon's fellow inmates suddenly jumped from a height and deliberately broke his own leg. He screamed in pain, but as he was carried away on a stretcher, there was a strange sense of satisfaction on his face. Every prisoner there knew that arriving at this prison was almost the same as walking into death. Historical records show that around 80,000 prisoners were sent to this penal colony. Many of them were innocent, yet fewer than 10% ever returned alive. The place was scorching hot, full of disease, and completely inhumane. The prisoners were violent and ruthless, but the most terrifying person was the prison warden, whom people considered almost devil-like. He didn't just enjoy killing prisoners. He was infamous for breaking their spirits and destroying them mentally. He had strict rules for escape attempts. The first escape attempt meant 2 years in solitary confinement. The second meant 5 years in solitary. If caught a third time, the prisoner would be sent directly to Devil's Island for life. Only murderers were immediately sentenced to death. Human dignity was completely stripped away in this prison. Hundreds of prisoners were crammed together into one massive sleeping area like animals. Heavy iron chains were fastened to every prisoner's legs. Looking up, they could see thousands of blood-sucking bats hanging upside down from the ceiling. Even using the toilet had to be done under the guards' supervision. Every day, prisoners were forced to work in the quarries, loading massive rocks blasted loose with explosives into carts. Exhaustion, heat stroke, and dying during labor were common. One day, while lifting stones, Dega accidentally dropped the capsule in which he had hidden his money. That money represented both their freedom and their future. Papillon immediately stopped working and frantically searched through the pile of rocks. With great difficulty, and just before the guards arrived, he finally found the capsule. Sometime later, they noticed a sailor who brought women to entertain the prison guards every month. Papillon asked him the price of helping them reach the shore and escape. The sailor demanded an enormous sum, without hesitation, 5,000 per person. It was a huge amount, but there was no other way to survive. Papillon accepted the deal, and they planned their escape for 3 days later. The next day, all the prisoners were suddenly gathered in the yard. The prison warden announced that the previous night, a prisoner had tried to escape after killing a guard, but had failed and been killed. It was none other than the same prisoner who had broken his leg upon arrival to avoid entering this hellish prison. In front of everyone, the warden ordered Papillon and Dega to carry the dead prisoner's body. For Dega, who was physically weak and frail, the task was extremely difficult. Already broken by fear and weakness, he collapsed while carrying the corpse. He had no strength left and couldn't even stand up again. The guards showed no mercy. One of them pulled out a leather whip and mercilessly lashed the helpless Dega. Unable to bear watching his friend being beaten nearly to death, Papillon grabbed a large stone from the ground and smashed it into the guard's head with all his strength. The guard collapsed unconscious. Papillon knew there was no longer any option except escape. He ran for his life, reached a high cliff, and leaped into the sea. Fortunately, he escaped both the bullets raining down behind him and the pursuing guards. He stayed hidden until nightfall, then reached the riverbank and found the sailor he had previously negotiated with. He didn't have the money yet, but promised to pay the full 5,000 once he reached safety. The sailor, however, had already seen through his deception. He appeared calm, but the moment Papillon turned around, the sailor's companions, lying in wait, captured him. The next day, Papillon was brought back to prison. The only relief was that the guard he had struck with the stone had survived. Nevertheless, Papillon was punished. He was sent to Saint Joseph Island, where he would spend 2 years in solitary confinement. This place was even more horrifying. There was no doctor. If someone fell sick and died, they simply died. No one cared. Every movement inside his cell was watched. He wasn't allowed to speak. He wasn't even allowed to make a sound. Each day, he received only 1 serving of watery vegetable soup that barely filled his stomach. On top of that, the guards regularly tortured him. To stay alive, Papillon drank every last drop of the filthy soup and slept as much as possible to conserve energy. Then, one day, a ray of hope appeared. Inside a new food barrel, he found half a coconut along with a small note. It informed him that Dega had paid a huge bribe to send it to him. Papillon was deeply moved. He realized his friend had not forgotten him. From that day onward, he resumed exercising and tried to keep himself mentally strong. But it didn't last long. Only a week later, the secret of the coconut was discovered. The employee who had accepted the bribe was beaten to death on the spot. The matter reached the prison warden, who threatened Papillon: reveal his accomplice's name or lose even more food. Once again, Papillon remained silent. His condition rapidly deteriorated. He became so thin that his bones were clearly visible. Every month, prisoners had to stick their heads out to have their hair cut. During those moments, he looked around and noticed how many prisoners had disappeared forever and how many cells had been permanently sealed. Gradually, he became emotionally numb. Sometime later, the prison warden brought him meat soup. But instead of drinking it, Papillon did something bizarre. He scooped up the soup and held it toward the warden, as though feeding a child. The warden concluded that Papillon had gone insane and immediately ordered the only remaining source of light in the cell to be blocked off. Now even light was taken away. For months he lived in total darkness, where the line between dreams and reality slowly disappeared. He became so weak that he no longer even had the strength to commit suicide. Gradually, he began having hallucinations. Sometimes he saw his beautiful wife. Sometimes Dega appeared dressed as a clown. At other times, he imagined his cell door was a giant vault that he could open. Everyone believed Papillon had completely lost his mind. But the truth was different. When Dega visited him in the prison hospital one day, he realized that although Papillon's body was broken, awareness still shone in his eyes. In reality, Papillon had been pretending to be insane the whole time. Instead of swallowing the sleeping pills he was given, he secretly hid them. Then, one day, another opportunity to escape presented itself. On a Tuesday, the prison warden invited wealthy and influential local people to the prison for a film screening. Because of the event, security became weaker. Papillon and Dega decided to seize the opportunity. They recruited a bearded prisoner and a handsome young inmate as well. The plan was for Dega to mix the powdered sleeping pills into the guards' wine, rendering them unconscious so everyone could escape. But at that very moment, a violent storm arrived. The movie had to be stopped midway, and everyone began leaving. Their entire plan seemed ruined. Then fate intervened. Lightning struck, knocking out power throughout the prison. Complete darkness covered the compound. Taking advantage of the confusion, Dega stole the key to the main gate. Hidden by darkness, they advanced until they finally reached the high wall beyond which freedom awaited. But just as it was Dega's turn to climb over, the electricity came back on. Startled by the sudden light, he panicked, fell, and badly broke his leg. Even so, the others refused to abandon him. Carrying him, they ran to the riverbank and used their hidden money to buy a small boat. The boat drifted downstream. A few hours later, they discovered there was a hole in it, and it was filling with water. The bearded prisoner suggested killing Dega and throwing him into the sea to lighten the boat. Papillon immediately opposed the idea. An argument broke out, quickly escalating into a bloody fight. During the struggle, the young prisoner fell into the sea. Meanwhile, the bearded prisoner had a knife and soon gained the upper hand over Papillon. It seemed he was about to strangle him to death. At that moment, Dega picked up the knife lying nearby and, to save his friend, attacked the bearded prisoner. In a rage, he stabbed him again and again until his body was riddled with wounds. Soon afterward, they discovered that the young prisoner had also survived. In the end, only the bearded prisoner, the one who had started the conflict, died. But their troubles were far from over. Shortly afterward, a terrible storm swallowed their boat. When Papillon regained consciousness, he found himself on a deserted island not far from the prison. A nun had saved their lives. She clearly warned Papillon that if he stayed there, he would certainly be captured and should leave immediately. But Dega, exhausted by constant escape attempts and burdened by his broken leg, decided to remain there. The young prisoner also stayed with him. Reluctantly, Papillon continued alone. He had not gone very far when he saw prison vehicles approaching the island. He immediately ran back to take Dega with him, but it was too late. The guards arrived, shot the young prisoner dead, and captured both Papillon and Dega. The biggest shock came when they learned that the very nun who had saved their lives had reported them. The punishment for a second escape attempt was 5 years in solitary confinement. By now, Papillon's body was completely broken. His hair had turned white, and he looked like an old, sick man. Even the prison warden was amazed that he was still alive after enduring so much torture. When the warden failed to break his spirit, he decided to destroy his body instead. That was why Papillon was sent to Devil's Island, one of the most terrifying prisons in the world. The island was surrounded by a raging ocean. Supplies arrived only by ship. It was considered almost impossible to escape. Devil's Island needed few walls or armed guards because nature itself was the prison's greatest defense. Furious seas, deadly currents, and sharks guaranteed death. Anyone who tried to escape either drowned or was eaten by sharks. But by now, all the suffering Papillon had endured had only strengthened his resolve. Every day, he spent hours watching the sea. He carefully studied the waves, tides, and ocean currents. Other prisoners thought he was simply wasting time, but in his mind, a new plan was taking shape. After months of observation, he noticed something important. Certain waves and currents flowed away from the shore instead of back toward it. He concluded that if he jumped into the sea at exactly the right moment, these currents would carry him away into the open ocean rather than wash him back onto the island, eventually connecting him to the main ocean current. He made this theory his final hope.